This is probably one of the most important videos on this channel, as I will be talking about the God signal that exists within all human beings and that everyone without exception can feel it, including you who are watching this video right now, living with it day after day, and may have overlooked this beautiful feeling that dwells in all human hearts and connects us with God. It's about the law of human nature, or the law written in the heart as portrayed in the Bible. It immediately reminded me of C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity, masterfully addressing the essence of human morality and its divine origin. In the first chapter, Lewis unfolds the concept of the law of human nature, convincingly arguing that we all possess an innate sense of right and wrong, independent of culture or belief. This moral law, written in our hearts, not only guides our behavior, but also points to the existence of an absolute moral standard established by God. We can draw a parallel from the first chapter of his book, where he explains what the law of human nature is with the law written in the heart. In Romans 2:14-15, Paul writes, "For when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them." Paul is addressing here the idea that even those who have not been exposed to the law of Moses, namely the Gentiles, non-Jews, often act in accordance with the moral principles of this law simply by following their own conscience. This suggests the existence of a universal moral law, engraved by God in the heart of every person. Everyone has seen people quarreling. Sometimes the quarrel sounds funny, and sometimes it sounds merely unpleasant. But however it sounds, I believe that we can learn something very important by listening to the kind of things they say. They say things like, "How would you like it if someone did the same to you?" "This seat is mine. I was here first." "Leave him alone. He isn't bothering you. You pushed first." "Give me a piece of your orange." "I gave you a piece of mine." "Come on, you promised." People say things like this every day, both the well-educated and the ill-educated, both children and adults. This excerpt from Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis talks about how people, when they argue or quarrel, are not just expressing dislike or personal preferences. Instead, they are appealing to a set of rules or moral standards they believe are known and accepted by all. When someone complains about another person's behavior, it implies that there is a common right and wrong that both recognize. For example, if someone says you promised you wouldn't do that, they are not just saying they are disappointed. They are suggesting that breaking promises is wrong based on a shared understanding of keeping one's word. Interestingly, the accused person usually doesn't dismiss the existence of these rules. Instead, they try to justify their behavior by arguing that they didn't break the rule or that there was a valid reason for doing so in that specific situation. This indicates that even when people disagree, they often agree on the existence of some basic moral standard, a kind of law that governs fair and right behavior. If there were no such agreement on these basic standards, discussions would be impossible. They would devolve into physical confrontations or total indifference, with no room for argument or justification. Therefore, even in disagreements, a shared belief in certain fundamental moral principles that guide human interactions is revealed. Continuing with Lewis's ideas, the purpose of quarreling is to show that the other person is wrong, but it wouldn't make sense to do that unless you and they had some agreement on what is right and wrong, just as it makes no sense to say that a football player committed a foul if there wasn't some agreement on the rules of football. Now, the law or rule about right and wrong used to be called natural law. Today, when we speak of natural law, we're usually talking about things like gravity, heredity, or the laws of chemistry. However, when ancient thinkers called the law of right and wrong natural law, they were actually referring to the law of human nature. The idea was that just as all bodies are governed by the law of gravity and organisms by biological laws, the creature called human being also had its law, with one big difference. A body can't choose whether to obey the law of gravity or not, whereas a person can choose whether to obey the law of human nature or not. This issue can be viewed from another angle. Any person is subject to different sets of laws, but there's only one law they have the freedom to disobey. As a body, they are subject to gravity and cannot disobey it. Once suspended in the air, they have no choice but to fall like a stone. As an organism, they are subject to various biological laws that, like animals, they cannot disobey. That is, they cannot disobey those laws they share with other things, but the law peculiar to their human nature, the law they do not share with animals, plants, or inorganic things, is the one they can disobey if they wish. This law was called natural law because people believed everyone knew it by nature and didn't need to be taught by others. Of course, they weren't saying it would be impossible to find a strange individual out there who didn't know it, just as you can find people who are colorblind or have no talent for music. After reading your words, I conclude that the concept of natural law transcends mere observation of physical phenomena such as gravity or chemical reactions, delving into the depths of what it means to be human. Historically, thinkers like Aristotle, Cicero, and Thomas Aquinas contemplated natural law as an intrinsic moral guide, an internal compass that distinguishes humans from other creatures. This law not only prescribes how we should act, but reflects the moral structure of the universe, suggesting a divine or transcendental origin. The freedom of choice of the human being, the ability to obey or disobey this law of human nature, is what most distinctly sets us apart from the rest of the natural world. While celestial bodies move according to immutable physical laws and animals follow their instincts unquestioningly, humans are in constant dialogue with natural law, deciding when to heed its call to goodness, justice, and truth, and when to stray onto less virtuous paths. This unique capacity for choice places immense responsibility upon our shoulders. In our modern society, marked by diverse beliefs in the pursuit of individual autonomy, the notion of a universal natural law may seem challenging. However, it is precisely this capacity for choice, informed by a common moral sense, that allows us to engage in dialogue about ethics, human rights, and social justice on a global scale. Recognizing natural law as a moral foundation is not to restrict human freedom, but to acknowledge that our freedom is most meaningful when guided by universal principles that promote the common good. It is interesting to note how, despite the varied cultural expressions of morality, there is a common thread, a tacit agreement on fundamental values such as human dignity, equity, and mutual respect, reflecting the persistence of the law of human nature in all societies. This recognition does not deny the ethical and moral differences between cultures, but emphasizes a common ground that enables cooperation and mutual understanding in an increasingly interconnected world. Again, Lewis writes, however, taking the race as a whole, they thought that the human idea of dignified behavior was obvious to everyone. I believe they were right. If they weren't, then everything we said about war would have been absurd. What sense would it make to say the enemy is wrong if what is right isn't something real that, deep down, the Nazis knew just as well as we did and had a duty to put into practice? If they hadn't had a notion of what we meant by right and wrong, then as much as we continued to fight them, we couldn't blame them any more for it than for the color of their hair. I know some people consider natural law or the law of dignified behavior, known to all men, unfounded because various civilizations and peoples of various times have erected very different moral doctrines. But this is not true. It's true that there are differences between their moralities, but these have never amounted to a total difference. If someone took the trouble to compare the moral teaching of ancient Egyptians, Babylonians, Hindus, Chinese, Greeks, and Romans, they would indeed be struck by how similar they are to each other and also to our moral teaching. Some of the evidence for this is gathered in an appendix to another book of mine called The Abolition of Man. But for our present purpose, it's enough for me to ask the reader to just imagine what a completely different morality would be like. Imagine a country where people were admired for fleeing from battle, or where a person took pride in having deceived all those who were kind to them. It would be like trying to imagine a country where 2 + 2 = 5. There is disagreement about the people you should be altruistic towards, whether it's just your own family or your fellow countrymen or everyone. But they have always agreed that you should never put yourself above others, as selfishness has never been something to be admired. People differ on whether you should have 1 wife or 4, but they have always agreed that you cannot simply have any woman you desire. But the most striking fact is this. Even if you can find a person who adamantly claims not to believe in right and wrong, that same person will appeal to it immediately afterward. They may even break the promise they made to you. But if you try to break yours with them, they will quickly complain that it's not fair. A nation may even say they don't care about treaties, but then the next moment they start presenting their case, saying that particular treaty the others want to break was unfair. Yet if treaties don't matter, if there is no such thing as right and wrong, in other words, if there is no natural law, what would be the difference between a just treaty and an unjust one? Wasn't it they themselves who betrayed it, showing that as much as they speak against it, they know natural law just like anyone else? Lewis uses the example of World War II and the fight against the Nazis to illustrate his point. He questions how we could judge the actions of the Nazis as wrong if there were no objective and universally recognized moral standard. Without such a standard, war would be reduced to a mere dispute of preferences, without a moral basis to assert that one party was right and the other wrong. To reinforce his argument, Lewis challenges readers to imagine a society with moralities radically different from those we consider acceptable, such as one that values cowardice or deceit. He suggests that such an exercise is almost impossible because the differences between human moralities are variations around a common theme, not total discrepancies. He also addresses how, despite cultural variations on whom we owe our loyalty to or how many wives one can have, there is consensus on principles such as the rejection of selfishness and the unlimited right to desire. This similarity in moral foundations across distinct cultures points to natural law as a universal truth. Finally, Lewis argues that even those who deny the existence of objective right and wrong ultimately invoke these concepts in their own arguments, revealing a contradiction that confirms the undeniable presence of natural law. Even in the rejection of treaties or the breaking of promises, people naturally resort to the notion of justice, demonstrating that, deep down, they know and recognize the law of human nature. Continuing in your words, it seems then that we will be forced to accept that there is right and wrong. People can often deceive themselves about them, just as people sometimes make mistakes in calculations. But this is not a mere matter of taste or opinion, but of multiplication tables. Now, if we agree on this, I will move on to my next point, which is this. None of us actually observes natural law. If there is any exception among you, I apologize. It would be better for them to read another book, as nothing of what I'm going to say concerns them. And now let's turn back to ordinary human beings. I hope you don't misunderstand what I'm about to say, for I don't want to preach, and God knows I don't intend to be better than anyone else. I'm just trying to draw attention to the fact that this year, or this month, or more likely today itself, we have failed to adopt the kind of behavior we expect from others. We can use any excuse. That time when you were unjust to your children, it was when you were too tired. That somewhat shady deal, the one you almost forgot about, came up when you were financially tight. And what you promised to do for good old so-and-so and never did, well, you would never have promised to do it if you knew how busy you would be from that day on. And as for your behavior towards your spouse or husband or sister or brother, if I knew how annoying they could be, I wouldn't be surprised. And after all, who do I think I am? I'm no different at all. That is, I'm not very successful in observing natural law. And when someone tells me that I'm not observing it, an endless list of good excuses comes to mind. The question at this moment is not whether these excuses are good. The fact is that they are further proof of the depth of our belief in natural law, whether we like it or not. If we didn't believe in dignified behavior, why would we be so concerned about making excuses for not having behaved in a dignified manner? The truth is that we believe so much, we feel the rule of law pressing upon us so strongly, that we can't face the fact that we're breaking it and consequently trying to shirk responsibility. You end up realizing that it is only for our bad behavior that we give all these explanations, and it is only our bad mood that we try to justify by tiredness, anxiety, or hunger, while our good mood we attribute to ourselves. These are then the 2 points I would like to emphasize. First, that human beings from all corners of the world have this curious idea that they should behave in a certain way, and they really can't not do it. Secondly, individuals, in fact, do not behave in that way. They know the moral law, but they transgress it. These two facts are the basis of all clear thinking about ourselves and the universe we live in. In this revealing passage, C.S. Lewis confronts us with an uncomfortable yet undeniable truth about our human nature. We know right from wrong, but often fail to live according to that knowledge. This dilemma is not merely theoretical or philosophical. It permeates every aspect of our daily lives, affecting our relationships, our choices, and our spiritual growth. In everyday life, this conflict manifests in small choices and large dilemmas. Whether in the impulse to speak a harsh word in response to momentary frustration, the temptation to be dishonest for personal gain, or the omission of an act of kindness for convenience. Each of these moments represents an internal battle between following the natural law inscribed in our hearts and yielding to our human weaknesses. For Christians, this recognition of our fallibility should not lead to despair, but rather to an acknowledgement of the need for grace and redemption found in Christ. The message of the gospel is not that we must be perfect through our own efforts, but that despite our failures, we are loved by God and called to a life transformed by His presence. The Apostle Paul echoes this truth in his letters, especially when he speaks of his own struggle with sinfulness, Romans 7:15-25. The Christian life then becomes a continuous journey of repentance, seeking God, and allowing His Spirit to transform and empower us to live in a way that more faithfully reflects the natural law He has inscribed in our hearts. In practice, this means adopting a posture of humility, acknowledging our shortcomings and seeking forgiveness and restoration in relationships we've damaged. It also means striving daily to align our actions with the moral principles we recognize as true, seeking God's help to overcome tendencies that lead us astray. Furthermore, this understanding calls us to be patient and merciful with others, recognizing that everyone is fighting their own internal battles. Instead of quick judgment, we are called to offer the same love, grace, and encouragement we've received from God. Ultimately, recognizing our inability to perfectly fulfill the natural law leads us to a deeper dependence on God and a richer appreciation of His grace. It also motivates us to live more intentionally, seeking to reflect God's love and justice in every aspect of our daily lives. In this process, we discover that true transformation does not come from our strength, but from the transformative power of God's love working in and through us. And if you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you wish to watch another inspiring video, check out the video I'll leave on the screen about anti-Christian habits that you should be aware of.